and welcome back to my vlog. We're on to part 20, The Creative Process in the Individual by Troward, Chapter 9, Conclusion. Although I think there's more after the conclusion. This is broken into many parts. This is part 1. We are now in a position to see the place occupied by the individual in the creative order. We have found that the originating and maintaining force of the whole creative process is the self-contemplation of the spirit, and that this necessarily produces a reciprocal corresponding to the idea embodied in the contemplation, and thus manifesting that idea in a correlative form. We have found that in this way the externalization of the idea progresses from the condensation of the primary nebula to the production of human beings as a race, and that at this point the simple generic reproduction of the idea terminates. This means that up to and including genus Homo, the individual, whether plant, animal, or man, is what is simply by reason of race, conditions, and not by exercise of deliberate choice. Then we have seen that the next step in advance must necessarily be by the individual becoming aware that he has power to mold the conditions of his own consciousness and environment by the creative power of his thought, thus not only enabling him to make a conscious part in his own, to take a conscious part in his own further evolution, but precluding him from evolving any further except by the right exercise of this power. And we have found that the crux of the passage from the fourth to the fifth kingdom is to get people so to understand the nature of their creative power as not to use it destructively. Now what we require to see is that the creative process has always only one way of working, and that is by the reciprocity or reflection, or as we might say, by the law of action and reaction, the reaction being always equivalent and correspondent to the action which generated it. If this law of reciprocity be grasped, then we see how the progress of the creative process must at length result in producing a being who himself possesses the power of independent spiritual initiative and is thus able to carry on the creative work from the standpoint of his own individuality. Now the great crux is first to get people to see that they possess this power at all, and then to get them to use it in the right direction. When our eyes begin to open to the truth that we do possess this power, the temptation is to ignore the fact that our power of initiative is itself a product of the similar power subsisting in the all-originating spirit. If this origin of our own creative faculty is left out of sight, we shall fail to recognize the livingness of the greater life within which we live. We shall never get nearer to it than what we may call its generic level, the stage at which the creative power is careful of the type or race, but is careless of the individual. And so at this level we should never pass into the fifth kingdom, which is the kingdom of individuality. We have missed the whole point of the transition to the more advanced mode of being, in which the individual consciously functions as a creative center, because we have no conception of a universal power that works at any higher level than the generic, and consequently to reach a specific personal exercise of creative power we should have to conceive of ourselves as transcending the universal law. But if we realize that our own power of creative initiative has its origin in the similar faculty of the all-originating mind, then we see that the way to maintain the life-giving energy in ourselves is to use our power of spiritual initiative so as to impress upon the spirit the conception of ourselves as standing related to it in a specific, individual, and personal way that takes us out of the mere category of genus Homo and gives us a specific spiritual individuality of our own. Thus our mental action produces a corresponding reaction in the mind of the spirit, which in its turn reproduces itself as a special manifestation of the life of the spirit in us. And so long as this circulation between the individual spirit and the great spirit is kept up, the individual life will be maintained and will also strengthen as the circulation continues. For the reason that the spirit, as the original creative power, is a multiplying force, and the current sent into it is returned multiplied, just as in telegraphy, the feeble current received from a distance at the end of a long line operates to start a powerful battery in the receiving office, which so multiplies the force as to give out a clear message, which, but for the multiplication of the original movement, could not have been done. Something like this, we may picture the multiplying tendency of the originating mind, and consequently, the longer the circulation between it and the individual mind goes on, the stronger the latter becomes. And this process, growing habitual, becomes at last automatic, thus producing an endless flow of life continually expanding in intelligence, love, power, and joy. But we must note carefully that all this can only proceed from the individual's recognition that his own powers are a derivative from the all-originating spirit, and that they can continue to be used constructively only so long as they are employed in harmony with the inherent forward movement of the spirit. Therefore, to ensure this eternally flowing stream of life from the universal spirit into the individual, there must be no inversion in the individual's presentation of himself to the originating power. For through the very same law by which we seek life, the life, namely, of reciprocal action and reaction, every inversion we bring with us in presenting ourselves to the Spirit is bound to be faithfully reproduced in a corresponding reaction, thus adulterating the stream of pure life, and rendering it less life-giving in proportion to the extent to which we invert the action of the life principle, so that in extreme cases the stream flowing through and from the individual may be rendered absolutely poisonous and deadly, and the more so, the greater his recognition of his own personal power to employ spiritual forces. And that's the end of part 1 of the conclusion, chapter 9. Make it a great day, and bye for now.